There is a very distinct memory I have of climbing onto the kitchen counter and grabbing the canister of sugar, just white granulated sugar, straight. And I took a glass and I just was dumping the sugar into this glass till, it was filled up by, probably that much at the bottom. And then I took Coca-Cola, and poured that over it and filled up the glass. And then I took the spoon and was just eating this sugar that was soaked with Coke and just eating it by the spoonful.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast. I'm your host, Jeanne Byrd. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast, transforming love lives one bite at a time. I'm Jeanne Byrd. I'm a love and relationship coach, and I have a Master's of Science degree in health coaching and advanced nutrition. So I am so excited to start the ball rolling on this podcast. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the question of identity, who you think you are as it relates to love. And don't forget to listen until the very end because you're going to get access to a link and a tool that will help you uncover what your particular identity is. So to help us make sense of all of this is my guest, Ashley Fuller Rubin, an expert in what psychologist Catherine Woodward Thomas calls our false love identities and our true love identities. So Ashley, I'd love you to just say hello before I introduce you officially.
Oh, hello, Jeannie. Hello, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're so welcome. And Ashley has been coaching, mentoring, and guiding thousands of heart-centered, high-achieving, conscious women from around the globe for more than a decade, helping them to break free from their painful inner barriers and limiting patterns to unconditionally love and accept themselves to live in flow by embracing the feminine and step into their sovereign queen self, to be the woman they came into this world to be, and to create the extraordinary, flourishing life and loving relationships of their dreams. Ashley's a certified woman-centered transformational coach, licensed spiritual counselor, path of self-love guide, and a multi-award-winning teacher and coach to queens. She's been personally trained, mentored, and worked closely with Dr. Claire Zammit, the founder and creator of Feminine Power and Woman-Centered Coaching, for more than a decade. She's also studied with Dr. Jeanne Houston, Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, and will graduate this June with her master's in consciousness studies. She lives in Canada with her partner, Cliff, and they're both leaders at the Center for Spiritual Living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And Ashley, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about your work at the Center for Spiritual Living.
I would love to. We have definitely found our home here. It's such a beautiful place. This is a spiritual center. I'd say it's spiritual, not religious.
Yeah.
And my work here is supporting people to thrive, to transform their lives. I lead a women's circle here. There are 40 to 50 women who show up each month for that, which is
Oh,
wonderful.
yes.
And I also give talks and, just about anything that's needed to support the community in transformation. And it's been quite the journey. We've been here for about a year. And we, in looking back, can see how everything we were doing up until now, like everything has led into everything. Everything has fed into everything, leading us right here where we feel we are home. We found our community.
Oh, that is so inspiring. And I can
Thank
just,
you.
really imagine you and Cliff positively impacting an entire community and probably spreading out from there, into a greater platform. So, when I knew I was going to do an episode about love identities, I had to have you on because not only are you one of the first ever calling in the one coaches, but your personal love identity journey is one of the clearest, and the best examples, I think, of how all this works. And I know from personal experience that you have one of the deepest centers filled with pure love and heart. So you had to be on.
Ah, thank you. I'm so honored.
Oh, great.
Oh,
So when we
yeah.
think about love and relationships, and even the way that society and culture teaches us to think about it, everything is happening outside of us, like to
Mhm.
us, right? In other
Mhm.
words, we happen to be in the right place at the right time. And that's how we got lucky enough to meet our partner, or we disciplined ourselves, we maximized our appearance or our earning potential. And that's how we got what we want.
Mhm.
But
Right.
but as you and I know, so much about love, not hookups, but love, is really an inside out job. And the
Yes.
inside part of the equation has a lot to do with our identity, who we think
Mhm.
we are, and what we think
Yes.
we deserve. And so I think I'd like to begin this conversation by asking about your identity. Who is Ashley? What is your love identity, and how early in life was it created?
It was really kind of a combination uh, of I don't matter, I don't belong, and I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was the hottest one for you, and what age do you remember it, and what were you making that mean about yourself at that age?
Well, ultimately, I think that the I'm not lovable was the deepest, that was at the core.
Yeah.
But like peeling an onion or the lotus flower opening to get to that I'm not lovable, I was first bumping up against I don't matter. And the I don't matter was there. I didn't understand that I was swimming in waters of an I don't matter identity until later on in life. But I can definitely see looking back that that is what was at play for a long time.
So, can
Yeah.
you give me an example of, again, what age you were, however young you were, that you felt that I don't matter? What was that little girl feeling? What was going on?
Sure. Well, I was perpetually the new kid at school. So I went to 13 different schools before I was 11 years old. My family kept moving. We moved from state to state. We moved across the country 3 times. And so I was continually going into a brand new school, being the new kid, having to be introduced to the class I was being brought into, and often this would happen in the middle of a school year. So it was never like a clean, starting at the beginning of a school year. And I was a shy kid. So the first time the I don't matter really came to me was when I was at a girl's birthday party. I was in second grade, and was very excited. There were a bunch of us girls there. I was very excited because one of the most difficult things for me was that I was always, as soon as I'd make a friend, we would be moving again. And so at this birthday party, she pulled out photo albums, the day when we had photo albums. She would be pulling out these photo albums and looking back at birthdays past. And these other little girls were in those pictures, and I wasn't. And so I remember feeling, oh, Yeah. Gosh, that can still be there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Where are you feeling it in your body?
Oh gosh, just my throat just now, but in my heart.
Yeah.
I just really felt like invisible. I didn't belong and I did not matter. It was clearly for me in my mind at that age. Just, I wasn't part of the group. I wasn't part of the friendships that had been happening all these years. And one of the other hard things was that there was no respite at home either.
Yeah, wanted to find out about that. So how, yes, that identity was being reinforced by your peers, unfortunately, but it originated at home. And what was the dynamic?
Yeah, so my parents never, they just very rarely got along. There was a lot of screaming and fighting. There was abuse in my home that I experienced. And so there was a lot going on there where holing up in my room, I had a cat that I loved that was probably one of the best things for me, but otherwise I just felt safer and better in my room.
So at the
It was tough
beginning,
times.
then which was the strongest one? The I don't matter was the first one at home that as cognitively you can recall.
Yes.
So what was your relationship with your mom? How did she reinforce the I don't matter in your consciousness?
Well, my mom was very young when she had me, and so and my father, uh, they got married because she got pregnant with me. So when I came into the world, my mom said I was this amazing baby, but when I turned two, kind of, all hell broke loose, I guess.
The terrible twos.
Yeah. And so she didn't know what to do with me. She was so young. She was 21, I think.
Yeah.
And so she just thought, she said she thought I was a devil child, is what she called me. And
Oh my.
she distanced herself from me. And so I just didn't feel a connection with my mom. And she was also depressed in her marriage. So she wasn't really fully emotionally available. When my sister was born, I was almost 5 years old. And my sister was a very different kid. She and my mom bonded, they were very close. And so
Yeah.
I kind of always felt on the outside. So that reinforced that I don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I get
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wow. I'm wondering, around that time, from that really cognitively understanding that you didn't matter, what was your relationship with food, if you can recall back?
Oh, yes. There is a very distinct memory I have of climbing onto the kitchen counter and grabbing the canister of sugar, just white granulated sugar, straight. And I took a glass and I just was dumping the sugar into this glass till, it was filled up by, probably that much at the bottom. And then I took Coca Cola, and poured that over it and filled up the glass. And then I took the spoon and was just eating this sugar that was soaked with Coke and just eating it by the spoonfuls. And that was like, just a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. This was like the medicine for me at the time. Felt like I think I felt loved. I
Yeah.
felt loved when I was doing that. I didn't know any other way to get it.
Right.
So,
I so get that. That reminds me of a story that I have from, childhood. I was maybe about, 13 or 14 and I started to babysit and I came from a very, very critical home. My father left us when we were 4 and 3. And then my stepfather, 2 years later, came into the picture, and he was just insanely jealous of my close relationship with my mother that I had. So he pulled us apart. Even doing the dishes at night, he would make me get out of the kitchen and she would wash, and then I'd have to come in the room to dry. But he could not stand us being together. And he was so critical of me. So I would start going babysitting, and much like you know, when the kids were asleep, I would sneak into the cupboards in the refrigerator to see what sweets I could get, you know, just to calm, I guess, and soothe, you know, that critical feeling that was always surrounding me, you know. So I really get that, how food was this, you know, emotional salve for us
Completely.
to just get
Completely.
relief and comfort, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sounds like my father. Your stepfather. Sounds like
Yeah.
my father. Yeah, very critical. I was told I was stupid quite often. And babysitting, I think babysitting became so very attractive for the very reason you just mentioned. Okay, when the kids are asleep, I'll check out what's in the pantry. And they were always so kind, you know, oh, help yourself. Okay. So
Sure will.
thanks. And yep, finding the sweets or the chips or yeah, and it was something to feel temporarily great and soothed and calm, just like you said.
Yeah. So then moving on, you know, inside of this identity of I don't matter and getting in relationships. And I know you said that you had an early marriage. So I wonder, who was Ashley then? What was her identity inside of that? You know, as you know, became adolescent and then in your early, you know, adult years, inside of these identities, what was, you know, what was your relationships? What was the nature of your relationships? How did you do? How did you feel about yourself?
Well, I was definitely a serial monogamist before I met my prior husband. And I was that person who was just thinking that everything was outside of me. Love was out here somewhere. And I was still trying to prove to the world, to my family, that I was a good person. And so when I got engaged, I was elated because somehow in my mind that meant that I mattered, that I
Yeah.
meant that I could participate in the world, you know, like others do. It just meant things that it really didn't mean, but that's what I was thinking at the time.
Yeah.
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 I was worthy of someone wanting to marry me.
Right. So you were waiting to be chosen. You weren't in the consciousness of being the chooser yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then to further, you know, exacerbate the situation, what was going on in your food choices at that time?
Well, at that time, I was a big time, you know, pasta lover. That was carbs, you know, like that. Not good, not like vegetables. It was pasta with rich sauces and things like that. So fast food. Um, so yeah, I did not take care of myself at all. I didn't think about food in that way. I just wanted to always soothe myself. It's like a pacifier.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Food as a pacifier.
Hmm.
That's pretty potent and very clear. Yeah.
Hmm.
Talk about pacifier. When I was ending my first marriage, I'm now happily married. Yay. We'll talk about that
Yay.
later. But when I was ending my first marriage and working in the film industry, these crazy hours, you know, like 17-hour days, And I had the property master put Hershey's Kisses in my director's chair, and I would just unfoil those things and pop them in my mouth. And, by the end of the day, the bag was gone of Hershey's Kisses, and I was so utterly confused.
Oh,
I didn't know my left from my right, and I had to be very smart about all these things on the film set. And I certainly was not. And that actually began a few years' journey into getting hypnotized so I wouldn't eat chocolate, which worked for about 10 years.
wow,
But
that's
that just
amazing.
to say that this chocolate was a pacifier for the emotional turmoil that I was going through, with the divorce. And again, that's what we do with food sometimes. I'm wondering what happened with the food and your mood when you were raising your children. How did you navigate that?
Yes, well, my two daughters were the very best thing that came out of that marriage. And yes, so food actually, it was just an escape. Like I said, it was a pacifier, and it got worse when I went through a divorce from my first husband. So I was feeling like a failure at that point. And that's when I started going out and drinking with friends.
Yeah.
That's when I started having wine. Um, yeah, so that it was at the time of the divorce that it got worse. But in that marriage, I just didn't value myself. I just really didn't. The food kept numbing. That's why I called it a pacifier, because it kept numbing these incredibly painful feelings I had. I had just thrown away so much of myself and my dreams for my life for my husband at the time. I just
Yeah.
put him before me. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's really, and I know that in our discussion now, hopefully those who are listening are seeing themselves in some of their past experiences. And I just want to take a quick break here because when we come back, we're going to talk about how Ashley and I turned it all around. So don't you go away. Do you know what your love identity is? Take this quiz and find out. If you have a true love identity, it's easier to attract love. If you have a false love identity, it's much harder to attract love. A false love identity is the biggest hidden barrier to love. So take the love identity quiz and find out what your love identity is. Visit loveidentityquiz.com. So welcome back, Ashley. Let's dive in now to how we arrived at the truth of who we are, or our true love identity. So when did things start shifting and turning around for you, when sort of things coming together, getting more clear about the truth of who you are?
They really started becoming clear when I was dating after my divorce, because I was just sure at the time that my prior husband had been the problem in that marriage, right? And I came out of that marriage and started dating, and the relationships were just from bad to worse. These dating relationships, and I finally uh, and it was very public too, because I was a coach now, and I had taken on a job as being the Art of Love community director at Evolving Wisdom, where I was working. And I was challenged to find love using the principles that were being taught there. And So I was challenged to do this in a very public way and write about my experience. And so this was happening very publicly. And the last one, I thought I had met my person, someone I had known for a long time. So I announced to the world I had found my person. I wrote about it to thousands of people. And then it completely blew up in my face. And terribly, like terribly. I definitely was not laughing about it at that time.
Right.
I could find humor in it now, but at the time it was so embarrassing. I wanted to just hide under a rock. And what I could see was, wow, I'm the common denominator here. So
Yeah.
I got to look at myself. And so that was the pivotal moment for me that I started to turn toward myself with as much
Yeah.
empathy as I could. And I started on a path of self love, on a self love journey. And 3 months later, I met my now husband, who we just celebrated 8 years of marriage.
Oh,
So,
wonderful. Yes.
yes.
And that's a beautiful story. And I know
Thank you.
that was painful, of course.
Oh,
It
gosh.
was painful. And I think that God in the universe gives us that kind of not so subtle wake up call to say, it's time,
Yeah.
it's time to come home to yourself for the very
Yes.
first time, actually.
Yeah.
I have a similar story in that I remember very clearly with all the work, because you and I were working together in
Yeah.
Feminine Power and as coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had gotten divorced in 2003 and went online dating just in the beginning of it, right? And I think I dated every person in Los Angeles. And and of course, everything again with me too was outside of myself. And I was criticizing, remember my pattern of criticizing?
Oh, yeah.
And so I was criticizing all these people, and I would even put in the online profiles, you must be this, you must be that, you must be financially responsible. I was so repelling that I would not date me, you know. So finally in 2009, when the work had really like gotten into my bones, in 2009, I remember in the beginning of the year went, oh, I have arrived. I am in love with myself. And that's showing up in my life in all these ways,
Mm,
And
yes.
so I was really happy to, you know, understand that awareness had really gotten into me. It was in my bones. So I just want to, for our viewers, say, really what this true love identity is. It really opens up the possibility of us graduating from that false love identity of I don't matter, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not loved, to actually organize around and pay attention to what those deepest desires are that we have in our for our lives, to listen to those whispers of the heart and move toward them even if you don't know exactly what it is, but to trust yourself enough to lean in. So I'm wondering, can you share some of those experiences that you had where you began to really listen to the whispers of your heart and move toward that desire?
Hmm. Yeah. So what's interesting is that I had started listening to those whispers earlier on in other areas of my
Mhm.
life. Love was like the last final frontier,
Yeah.
and I had to be really nudged, gently pushed into that arena to actually do it. And I'm so glad that I did because um, once I started turning toward myself and getting to know myself for the first time, connecting with myself really from love, from a loving place for the very first time. And I started to recognize like my real feelings, my real needs that were here. And I started to actually care about myself in a way I never had before. I started to see myself as a lovable human being. and and yeah, it wasn't and when I met my husband, which was a very magical experience, it's not that I had perfectly arrived. Like every day I knew I was this lovable person, but I had enough of it that I know was what attracted him in, because I was sovereign now. I was
Yeah.
in myself. And then in our relationship, I continued to deepen into that love for myself. It's certainly a path and a journey, but having love in my life in this way for really the first time, a really beautiful love, someone loving me in that way at the same time I'm loving myself, also just kept enhancing the whole experience of stepping into this new love identity of I am a magnetic, wonderfully lovable human being.
And I matter to me,
Yes, I
first
matter
and
to
foremost.
me and I
Yes.
belong to me.
Yes. Oh, I
Yes.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Thank
And
you.
then, we get to reinterpret our experiences and craft a more empowering story of who we are and what's possible for us to have in this lifetime. We also have the opportunity to mentor that part of us that has been stuck in that story in ways that are similar to how we might lovingly correct, like your daughter, something that matters while we're centered in the truth.
Hmm.
We can now soothe and mentor our younger, hurt selves.
Yes.
And from that place of really loving yourself, you can turn towards that part of you who's hurting
Hmm.
and
That's
soothe
right.
her and let her know what's really true.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It becomes those stories that have now been transformed into these powerful, life affirming, new, true stories about ourselves. We alchemize the painful story into medicine that we can
That's
now
right.
give to others, which is so wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to know that we're on the other side of that pain,
Yes.
so that whatever we can, identify as maybe a sacred wound becomes our superpower as we share and impart our experiences and wisdom to others where they can find themselves in our story as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as you were going through all of that, let's talk about what was happening in your relationship with food during that time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was transforming right along with the love identity. That's for sure.
Right.
I remember the first piece of that transformation was starting to invest in organic food. I mean, that was a big step. Um, I started walking. I started doing, walking as a routine, as something I just did for myself. And I moved to a whole food plant based diet. I did that in 2017. So, gosh, that
Great.
was, yeah. So I started really just loving myself. And that was part of the loving myself, was the way I was choosing food. I mean, I think I may have mentioned to you before that I was that person who would be like, I have a craving for a sundae with caramel sauce and hot fudge. And I bet, it's 10 o'clock. I bet I could go out and find McDonald's. And of course, I knew the map of all the fast foods around town. I bet I could go out and get a sundae right now. And, because it was never about getting up at 10 o'clock at night and going out for a salad. So it
No,
was the
why
sundae.
bother?
So Right. So, so and I started to actually look at that. So these changes were coming from bringing into my awareness how I was treating myself and where my food addictions were. And so making these changes to organic, whole food, plant based eating, walking, drinking less wine. I mean, nowadays it's like one glass of wine or maybe two a week, if at all. And I have a morning routine that I
Yeah.
do.
Oh,
I
good.
cook more at home. So it's not that I don't have those cravings that still come sometimes,
Yeah.
but I am so like that was my insanity living around food. That is gone, thankfully.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not the emotional salve that it used to be because you're so fulfilled in your love relationship that you don't
Yes.
need that.
Right.
That's the transformation right there, I can
Hmm.
see. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I had a story that was my life actually because I developed an autoimmune condition in early adulthood, and it was all the stress of college, and as you know very well, and then all the stress of working on a film set
Right.
and working incredibly insane hours. And my food was, oh, those first bagels in the morning that were fresh,
Mm,
right there on the set. And then later on, the cheese platter was just, oh, so delicious. And then later on, the M&Ms or the Hershey Kisses. And so
God.
as my body began to break down, I had to really take a long, hard look at what my choices were, what my actions were, and adjust. And at that time, I was like moving into our coaching practices and
Mhm.
with the community. And I just took a leap of faith because I knew that coaching was really my deepest desire to
Yes.
serve in a different way than serving on a film set, to create much more of a soulful, positive
Mm,
impact in the world.
yes.
So I took a leave. I didn't take a leave. I actually retired early, 7 years earlier, before I would get a full pension, and left the film industry and trusted that, I would make it. I would make it on my own. So, I'm still working with the autoimmune, but yes, I became a health and wellness coach for that very reason. I was seeking
Right.
answers for this crazy autoimmune. And so, anyway, this began my desire to help others, heal from their physical maladies as well as their emotional desires to create and sustain love.
Mm, that's so
Yeah.
beautiful. It's such a powerful story, too, how you
Yeah.
came through that. Yeah.
So I just want to continue on, from this nutrition perspective. One of the most impactful ways of reinforcing a true love identity is to start, doing kind things for yourself, right? So you're centered in the I matter and the I'm lovable.
Mm,
So it stands to reason that you would then start becoming kinder to yourself, understanding what you are feeling and needing and acting on those,
mhm,
you know? So I'm wondering, I'd like to ask you,
mm.
in alignment with being kind to yourself, what is one choice and one action? One choice to be kind to yourself, one action. And I'm kind of looking for the choice being changing the relationship, your behavior to yourself, and then the action being some sort of food, thing that you could either commit to or release. What
Mm.
would be that for you, do you think?
Well, definitely it would be around the sweets. Like, what I notice now is sometimes my hand is reaching for something before I've even thought about it,
Right.
right? And so I think what would be so good for me is to just be incredibly aware when I'm in situations where I'm around food that I know isn't great for me, to connect with myself deeply,
Right.
to breathe, and probably to really tune into my own guidance, my own inner wisdom about what's going to be most supportive to me in a situation like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And so, what might be an action? What would be the actual action that would support that choice?
Well, I would say that before stepping into a party or where a movie set where they have craft services, you know, things like that, just getting really deeply connected to myself and doing some deep breathing, remembering who I am, remembering my commitment to being kind to myself. And when I'm in that space, just taking a moment, if I catch myself like looking over at something, to stop and just step away and to take some deep breaths to come back to the center of my being so that I am filling myself with my own love for myself, taking the time for myself, giving myself that empathy, maybe even asking the question, what is it that you're really needing right now?
Beautiful. Yeah. Because it certainly isn't that sweet, you
Because,
know.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. You know, every time I come across something, and for me, my food addiction always has been cheese. I mean, I could eat cheese morning, noon, and night. That's all I ever want. And of course, I don't eat dairy anymore because it really feeds the autoimmune in a really horrific way. So if I'm going to have cheese, I'll have goat or sheep. And, you know, and that's a whole different casein, meaning a protein. So it's not as bad for your gut. So, but when I'm ever, you know, really sometimes just like this piece of cheddar cheese is calling to me, I will just, you know, sometimes even pick it up and just lovingly look at it and then, you know, gently, when nobody's looking, put it in the trash. So I'm not being wasteful, obviously, but, you know, it's just that
yeah,
mindfulness to actually look
yes,
at it and to ask yourself, I mean, really, what's the meaning I'm making here? You
yes,
know? And
yes,
and how is this going to keep me stuck in my same old identities if I eat it?
yeah.
You know?
Right,
Yep.
because after you eat it, what goes on after you eat it is never the fantasy of how you're going to feel when you eat it. Because usually it's, why did I do that?
Yeah. Where was I
Right?
centered in consciousness
Yes.
that made me forget myself and my desires? You know? Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the depth with which we've been sharing and that you've been, you know, sharing here, Ash. It's really, you know, it's really impacted and me and hopefully the people who are watching to really get that what we're eating has everything to do with who we're being.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. And we get the chance to change that. We're a choice every moment. So if we really can be centered in the truth of who we are, we have the ability to choose differently. With every life situation that comes in our path, we get to choose. We get to choose love,
Yes.
love for ourselves and love for others. So I would say that one of the takeaways in our conversation, first of all, I'm going to share your pacifier phrase with everyone. I love that, the pacifier. Food as a pacifier, that's so true. But I think one of the more impactful things I'm taking away from this conversation is really that regardless of what has happened to us in our past, that it does not get the final say in our future. We get to grow and evolve and graduate from these patterns. And the legacy of pain that we lived through with our caregivers does not have to be repeated. You know?
Yes.
So I just wanted to share that. I'm wondering, is there any takeaway that you can identify from this conversation you'd like to share?
I was just like stopping myself because I wanted to say like, amen. Everything you were saying, I'm like, don't say it. Don't say it. Can't help it. It's coming. I think it's so important to really get that there is no one in the world like you. There never has been. There never will be. You are it. And your life matters so much. And it matters to the whole of the cosmos. And so if you can really get that, and that all of life actually is loving you and wants you to love you, if you can really get that, I hope you do. And one step at a time is what it is, transforming your life. You can do it. You can do this. Seen it 1,000 times. We've seen it, right? Over and over
Absolutely.
again. How we transform our lives. Yes.
I love that. And when we get triggered back into these false identities, into basically the lie, you know, we have the power to mentor ourselves back to the truth.
Yes.
Right. And that's our joy, and that's our privilege in this lifetime, to really lead with the truth of who we are. And like you said, I love that, you know, well, we each have a unique perspective. And if we don't act upon it in this lifetime, it will die.
Right.
It will die on our watch. So we need to really express ourselves in the truth of who we are. Listen to those whispers of our heart and move forward. Lean in to listen and then to act from that place.
Yes.
Yay!
Yay!
Amen!
Freedom!
Freedom!
Liberation!
Absolutely. Woo woo. All right. So Ashley, I wonder if you could share how people can get a hold of you.
Oh, gosh, I would love to. Well, my website is at my name, ashleyfullerrubin.com. And so you can actually go there, and there's a meditation to support you free that you could download from there if you'd like. So that's a great way to connect. And I have a little work with me area that would actually connect us. So that's a great
Beautiful.
way to connect. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Love Sugar podcast. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for listening and for watching if you're joining us on YouTube. If you got value out of this conversation, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when the next episode of the Love Sugar podcast drops. Until next time, always take care of yourself first.